get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And thanks for dropping by, Kneecaps Nation. We are ready for action once again here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by Philip Ernesto Byrne the Eighth. Phil, how you doing, my friend?
Better than 7 other Philip Ernesto Burns out there.
Yeah, clearly.
Definitely not my middle name. It definitely does not have my dad name the same as me. But
I got
Vince,
your middle initial
the
right.
brevity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're kind of at this point where we talked about it. Obviously, things are a little slow. However, again, the access is a little limited, but Allen Park, the majority of the team is in Allen Park for OTAs, kind of going through the weekend here. So it feels like we kind of can talk about some of the stuff going on, but it really not like a lot of news to report. But
No.
nonetheless, it is June 1st when we're taping this, so we are I believe under 100 days from the start of the regular season.
Correct.
Away. So that is a welcome sign if you are getting that football itch like Vince and myself that needs to get scratched here. So I don't know, kick things back to you and kind of talk about some OTAs, I guess.
Yeah, and I know that it's preseason and all that, but we only have to turn the calendar one more time before we actually see the Lions put toe to football in an actual game-like setting. July 31st is going to be the first preseason game in the Hall of Fame game, so it is coming up, whether we're ready for it or not. And like Phil alluded to, we do have OTAs going on down there at Allen Park, and we do know that there's a few of the veterans that are not a part of it, and that's okay. That's why they're called optional team activities. You don't necessarily have to be there at all until training camp. So that's okay. Phil, what I want to know from you is, in an ever-expanding NFL landscape where they're talking now about an 18-game regular season sooner rather than later, and you could have a product that's going to wind up ending closer to the start of the month of March as opposed to the start of the month of February. So keeping all that in mind, do you think that things like OTAs in the 2025 generation of the NFL, do you think these are even necessary at this point?
Maybe for like playbook install, and kind of some other things to kind of get things moving along. But it's very like, it's not the whole kit and caboodle. You're not going to go ahead and try, the trick play that you're waiting for, on week 5, week 6 to roll out in OTAs or anything like that. What's kind of crazy, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a side tangent here, but I feel like we've got time for it.
Yeah, take your time.
Is back when we were younger, around this time, there was NFL Europe. And you would basically have guys that were on the practice squads for, 32, maybe at the time it was 30, 31 NFL teams. I don't know where the Texans came in, but that they would send practice squad players, guys looking to make an NFL roster by the time training camp came. And now we have the UFL, which is this weird amalgamation that is out there, between what was the XFL and the USFL, 2 leagues that didn't quite cut it financially into one. And we know that they have the financial power of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and they're on TV networks and things like that. But
prominent TV networks, they're not buried on like True TV or something. They're on ESPN or they're on Fox.
But I feel like there's no stakes to these games. We do have a team here with the Michigan Panthers, but I don't know. I guess we're
all right.
Again, because it's June here.
I'll go right to the heart of the matter. Nobody knows the players. I mean, I think that's the big That's the big issue with a lot of this USFL. I don't think there's a lack of an appetite for it because we know that people tune into NFL Live at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday in the middle of June. So we know that people are okay with the idea of football year round. But if they don't know who is actually out there hitting these other guys out there in a San Antonio Brahmas versus St. Louis Battlehawks or whatever the flip the team names are.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tune in if I don't know who any of these guys are. I mean, heck, there may be a few guys where it's like, okay, I remember them from insert random Pac-12 after dark game here, however many umpteen years ago. But beyond
But
that, I don't know who these guys are.
but just think about it. If the Michigan Panthers had Hendon Hooker as their starting quarterback, I feel like we'd be watching these games because there'd be something to report on. I guess you could say, yeah, the competition isn't what he would even get in a preseason game, and maybe that's what the preseason is for. But there's so many guys that fall under the radar that used to have had an opportunity like NFL Europe or some sort of other league to play in. I just think that league, if it's moving forward, because don't get me wrong, I love the Tigers. You know, it's nice having Major League Baseball in the city. It seems like once you get down to the NBA Finals and hockey, and they get over with their respective seasons, it's just counting down the days. And this is kind of that sweet spot right now where we still have 100 days to go. That I wish there was some sort of like affiliation between the UFL and the NFL, where again, maybe it's training camp guys, maybe it's guys that were 6th and 7th round picks 3-4 years ago, just so that you would know some of these guys. And I know AJ McCarron played in that league, but that was way after the fact of being a backup in the NFL. And I don't think it ever came to fruition. So it was nice to get the Jake Bates story, and the signing and the exposure that he had. But it's just one of those things that I wish at this point in time we had Michigan Panthers with maybe like a Lions affiliation or something like that. And, you only need 5 or 6 players from the Lions to be on that team, and you can make it up of other players just so that you don't have to have 32 teams in that league. But it just seems like OTAs, because it is optional, you never know who's all going to show up. I just feel like the reps would be better in a game like environment or something like that for some of these guys.
Yeah, and I feel like I know there's a reason why the NFL is the only sporting organization that you can think of that doesn't have some sort of feeder system or taxi system like you have Major League Baseball with the tiered farm system. You got
Yeah.
the same with the NHL. The NBA is a little bit more convoluted than that, but they still now have the G League, which
Yeah.
is more or less teams that are affiliated with the others. Like the Pistons have the Motor City Cruise. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can send guys back and forth between the two. And I'm sure that the NFL has their reasons for not doing it this way, but I think besides the injury risk, which you could argue you could get injured
In
non-contact
practice.
at these
Yeah.
OTAs. So I'm only willing to go so far with you're going to risk getting these guys hurt if you force them to play meaningful off-season football. I don't see how this hurts the player in the sense that you are essentially getting to play the game that you love, which you haven't been in the NFL. You're on a roster or you're on a practice squad, but you're not actually
Yeah.
out there playing or hitting somebody or showing the world what you can do. If you're able to continue the audition process, for lack of a better way of putting it, I mean, I think we can all agree Hendon Hooker is on the back end of his audition process. And when that little bit of grain on the hourglass runs out, I think he's out of this league for all honesty's sake. So, what downside would there be to have a guy like Hendon Hooker, to use your example, Phil,
Yeah.
get into something like this if the NFL uses the UFL, XFL, whatever they're calling it these days, as kind of their
Yeah.
official feeder system, their taxi system? And the only downside is that they don't play concurrently with one another. So, like, an NFL team couldn't call one of these guys up mid-season and say, hey, you're doing great, we could use you right now. There isn't that instantaneous factor like there is with the other sports, which makes it complicated. But I don't know. There's got to be a way
Yeah.
to be able to utilize it better.
Yeah, but just to kind of tie it back to what we, kind of started off with, it's like I just don't think I think OTA is fine, right, for your veteran player that you know is going to be a starter. But for the guys that just are there and they're just practicing, like, how much further do they even really get, without getting some sort of game like atmosphere and environment to play in? So that's my pitch because, we know Roger Goodell and the 32 NFL owners are listening to this podcast intently.
Of course.
But I'm hoping that at least that's why there is the financial,
Wait.
you know,
Who's this?
oh,
We got Roger Goodell trying to call me right now. Say, text. Great job on the podcast. Couldn't have said it better myself, Raj. Oh, okay, cool.
Raj.
We're doing great. We're doing great.
What's really great is we're not live, Vince. So, oh shoot,
All
cat's out
right.
of the
That's
bag.
a hole in that argument. Oh well.
But it is cool you got Roger Goodell's cell number, though. I like
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When Shadur Sanders got his cell phone handed around during the draft by Jeff Ulbrich's son, Raj's cell got leaked out too, so I was able to get out on
Right.
that. So,
Yeah.
not to reveal my sources or nothing, but
There
yeah.
we go.
So it remains to be seen what happens with OTAs in the future as the NFL continues to expand and they go to that
Yeah.
18-game schedule and they probably slash another preseason and because there's going to be some give back by the players union as
Yep.
the league continues to expand and maybe they say, hey, don't ask anything of us from the day we clean out our lockers until the day we're to report to training camp. So maybe that just means OTAs fall by the wayside. I don't know. But in any case, it's a good way to get some level of football action going on down there in Allen Park. And probably the biggest story, Phil, is Aidan Hutchinson getting back on the football field and not just doing his own individual workouts or drills or, making TikToks of himself in a pool or
Yeah.
something. He's actually out there with a shirt and helmet on, running around and doing some, albeit non-contact drills. And by all accounts, I'm kind of cheating off of Tim Twentyman, the Lions beat reporter here, with a lot of the intel because, again, it's not something that's heavily covered by the media. They don't have all sorts of trucks out there covering every last move, so you kind of have to be a little bit strategic on how you get your intel from what's going on down there. But it sounds like all systems are pretty much go for Hutch at this point, Phil.
Yeah. He, is dropping back into coverage. He's pretending to get some rush and hurry kind of situations in, but it is non-contact. But just the fact that he is out there, I guess he does have a full leg sleeve, on the injured leg, but just simple precautions. A lot of guys play with leg sleeves anyways to just kind of let the leg alleviate some pressure and
Shout
things.
out
But
Angel Reese.
yeah, absolutely. And just really looking good in his movement. And I think that's kind of what we want to see at this point in time.
So I think it's clear the main objective is to not aggravate anything. But what are you looking to see from him between now and the time the regular season starts? What is going to be key for you to kind of gauge how his recovery is going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to play in the preseason. Like, I just kind of think that's Dan Campbell's script, and he's going to stick to it to
Healthy
a
or
lot of
not.
his starters. Yeah. So, we won't really have that. So, I don't think it's been announced quite yet. Maybe if we do the, um, team contact drills, like the one-on-one kind of things. Maybe if he kind of takes part in that, maybe with like a red jersey or something. I don't know how that would work, but I think the thing is I guess it's gonna have to come from my own eyes. So I'm hoping to get out to training camp sometime in August when they open it up to the fans. So I'll just have to see it with my own eyes. I know he won't be doing a whole heck of a lot out there, but I think it is hard to kind of gauge where his progress is going to be. I think ultimately it's going to be a quote, and that quote, comes from Dan Campbell or someone else is going to let us really know, how he's feeling with where things are at, and just we're going to have to kind of play it off that until he actually lines up in full gear, full equipment, and is the week one presumed starter.
I will interject in the sense that there is a confirmed joint practice that is going to take place before the second preseason game, and that will entail the Dolphins coming up to Allen Park to kind of go at it for a few
Oh,
days
okay.
and practice before the preseason game. So that is confirmed. There is rumors that the Texans may travel up the following week for some joint practices, but that is yet to be actually confirmed. But the Dolphins for sure will be coming to town to partake in those joint practices. So that may be our best insight as to how Hutch is actually coming along, because the teammates for the Lions aren't going to necessarily go full bore at him, and nor is it worth it at that point. And like you said, I agree, he's probably not going to be playing in any actual preseason game. So that little
Yeah.
window right there, that's right before that second preseason game, might be our best window into how he's actually coming along before we take the field against the Packers week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, again, it's going to be one of those things that I'm sure as we get closer, we're going to get a little impatient. But this is one of those things we don't want to rush back. He is maybe the difference of that defense having a little bit more juice against Washington, right? I don't know if we would have been able to slow them down with the way that they executed the game plan, but it certainly would have helped, and who knows what kind of numbers he would have put up last year too on top of it. So, it's hard to be patient, when you've got a big chess piece like Aidan Hutchinson there, kind of getting unwrapped a little bit here, week by week.
No doubt about that. So, thinking back to the Washington game that you just brought up, and people will think about the defense and the injuries and all this, but the fact is the Lions still turned the ball over 5 times when they had the ball on offense. So, the question is, what are they doing in the offseason to help this offense get back on track? And that they lost Ben Johnson. He's now, of course, if you've been snoozing for the last 4 months, he's the head coach of the Chicago Bears. So, we're under a new offensive staff. So the question is, how are some of these offensive playmakers coming along? So again, looking at Tim Twentyman, some of the guys that he called out for good things as far as what they've done the back end of this week was Sam Laporta, Khalif Raymond, Craig Reynolds, and Jamison Williams. Guys out there looking pretty good in their respective workouts. I think you need to have assurance that everything is moving in that upward direction with the offense. There's going to be a little bit of a drop off just in the sheer sense of their changing coordinators, but
Yeah.
you're hoping for nothing but good news coming out of Allen Park for this offense this upseason.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that Ben Johnson did was obviously, the play calling and kind of dialing up a trick play once in a while. That's one thing that I want to see if John Morton's going to kind of keep that as a wrinkle. I think the commitment to run, I think, is going to be the same as well, so we should be able to get that. But that is one of my most curious pieces is what does the John Morton playbook look like? What are his tendencies going to be? Unfairly, he did not have a great season or two in New York when he was the Jets offensive coordinator, but good luck to anyone trying to make, chicken salad out of that chicken, for the Jets offensive, talent that
I
they
mean,
had that one year.
heck, I couldn't even remember who has been the last successful offensive coordinator for the Jets. I mean, even thinking back to when they were good and they were going to going to AFC championship games, back in the early 2010s, it was all about their
It was
defense.
all defense.
Yep,
Yeah.
It was Rex Ryan and his vaunted defense, and you really weren't hearing much about the offense. That was just kind of along for the ride. So I don't want to rag on John Morton too much, but we still don't know what he is exactly as far as what we can expect. Is he going to be more methodical, or is he going to be more Madden-like, or we don't know. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're going to have to figure a lot of that on the fly. But I do agree with you, Phil. You called it out a moment ago that the commitment to running the ball is going to be probably just as high as it ever has been. And the big way to facilitate that is by stellar play from your offensive line. And I think, contrary to what we've seen from the defensive line, and we've ragged on them for it, I think it's important to call out with appreciation that they are continuing to make investments in this offensive line. And we're seeing a little bit of an offensive line competition play out before our eyes. So we saw second-round pick Tate Ratledge kind of moving back and forth between right guard, which is going to be his presumed home for this season, but he was also getting quite a bit of reps at center, with Frank Ragnow obviously being hit and miss as far as what he's going to be partaking in, and that's going to be the case all season long. Ragnow's not going to partake in every single workout, every single practice, so Ratledge was getting quite a bit of reps at center, which was nice to see. We had, of course, Graham Glasgow out there. Awasika was out there quite a bit. Mahogany was out there quite a bit, kind of doing some rotations. So it looks like there's a more of an abundance of guys that can step up and show that they essentially belong in a starting role out there on this offensive line, which is nice to see.
And I think for Lions fans, I think there's a lot of excitement about Ratledge on one side and Mahogany on the other. These are two young guys that like to play nasty and might have a little bit of like a Bash Brothers kind of impact there, where they're coming off a rolling, get past the tackle out onto a run or something like that, and they're just gonna wreak havoc on a opposing linebacker, defensive end, or something like that to free up someone.
So who are some guys that stood out? So it sounds like Ennis Rakestraw is one of the guys who opened up some eyes this past week, and that's important because even though he appeared in 8 games, it felt like he played in about 2 of them because he was essentially non-factors in the majority of those before he was finally shut down for the season with injury. He got a lot of time when Terrion Arnold was off the field for one reason or another, so Rakestraw in those situations took part in a lot of the first team stuff alongside DJ Reed, and what made a little bit of an impact on special teams during some special teams drills as well. Rakestraw got a couple shout outs from some of his fellow teammates, so he's another guy that you got to have on board heading into this year, especially the fact that they didn't build up that defensive line like you hope, so the secondary's got to be able to hold their water any opportunity they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's really going to be the key to it. And I think they've got some young guys that are going to be in there, but I don't think any of us want to see necessarily like Rock Ya-Sin as a starter. You know, if we can avoid it. I think he had his time to shine, maybe, and not quite sure when that was, but it wasn't now. So
Not with us, at least.
No. So, we got to hope that Terry and Arnold can continue to develop and get on the field a little bit more. But promising sign about Ennis Rakestraw. That's good to see. Kind of in the early off season, I did talk about how he was one of my big, kind of things to look out for this off season as far as what does his development look like, because we just haven't seen the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew we were going to get to this at some point. So the question is, what's going on with the defensive lines? So it sounds like Marcus Davenport looks to be also getting healthy alongside Hutch. So whatever was bothering him last season seems to be working itself out. He did have a couple of nice rushes, made a couple nice plays, deflected a pass, got up off the ground, made a nice play. So that was encouraging to see. The question is, okay, you're assuming Davenport's going to be starting up front alongside Hutchinson. So who are some of those next guys who have been kind of making plays? And, of course, we have to look at it in context. This is non-contact. These guys aren't out there just barrel rolling anybody. So It's still a lot of shirts and helmet type of workouts here. So we're just taking it for what it is. But some guys that 20 men called out that had some good plays this week were Isaac Ukwu, who we saw last season, and the rookie they just drafted, Amon Hassanin, made a couple of nice plays over the course of the week. So it's going to be a matter of how that depth behind Hutch and Davenport fills out. And again, you hope to God that they're not relied upon in the same manner that they were a year ago. But if you're able to keep some guys' legs fresh in those depth spots, if they can come in and make a big play while they're spelling one of the starters, that is something that's kind of nice to have in your war chest when you need it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all about Hutch as the star back there. We'll see what the contribution is going to be from Davenport. I think most people expect Za'Darius Smith coming back to this team at some point. But again, we don't want to get into the reps and situations that we had last year. But I will say, if these guys impressed in that time, it's nice to know that you may have a rotational piece with some of these guys so that when Hutch does need a breather from time to time, they're good to go.
Yeah, for sure. So the question that I have that I want to kind of gain your thoughts on is I think Zadarius make the Zadarius Smith thing makes a lot of sense. So the question is, when hypothetically would they make such a move? Do you think it's something that takes place prior to training camp even getting started, or you think it's something that doesn't happen until closer to the regular season starts when roster cutdowns take place, or where do you kind of thinking as far as that looks?
Well, I guess it just kind of depends on where we start hearing the roster battles might be at in training camp because I think you're more than likely to get a situation where he's going to be brought in that would actually be past cut day, and they're putting the roster together. They already know what they have from him. He would not be playing in any of these games. So, um, if there's some sort of tentative agreement that maybe hasn't been made public yet, that they, have reached out to him. Again, he's been at Pistons games in the offseason. He's been around in the community for one reason or the other, but I think he is going to come back, and I think he wants another crack at some of those teams in the division. So it's just all about kind of trying to do the timing of when it will be. I don't think there's really a reason to bring him in just to have him do um, the preseason games just to suit up for them. Just he won't be playing, so I would venture it would be past those preseason games. That's just my 2 cents. I could be completely wrong, and within 2 weeks they signed him to the team after they get through OTAs. So it's hard to say. I just think there's been too much talk about it. Um, I think there's just a case of like where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, for sure. So the last little piece of this whole week one OTA puzzle is just comments from Dan Campbell. And we really haven't heard a whole lot from him outside of
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of a blurb during in and around the draft time. But, this is the first time he really got
wrestling
to
a
the.
mattress in a flatbed truck.
Yeah,
That was pretty
yeah.
much the only thing we've seen of him lately.
Exactly. And I'm sure he probably took some time to maybe not go into hiding necessarily, but to, maybe step away a little bit after the way
Yeah,
things went last season, because I'm sure it took a hell of a lot out of him, even just looking at injuries and all those nights he probably stayed up all night long trying to figure out how am I going to put a game plan together for insert next opponent here. So I'm sure he took some time to do what he had to do to kind of refresh, and then he'll get that time to refresh a little bit more before training camp starts, which is important. But he did have a few things he wanted to say about what their goals for the offseason were and what he's seeing so far out of a lot of these guys and looking ahead to the schedule and what he thinks and usually Dan Campbell gives you some pretty good stuff. It seemed like a lot of coach speak this time around as far as, I love the guys in that locker room. We can't use injuries as an excuse. Got to be next man up. Offense has to carry their water. And, the schedule that we have this year, I love the schedule. We'll play anybody, anytime, anywhere. So a lot of coach speak that, isn't really worth diving too terribly deep into.
yeah. What's interesting though is no shocker. He likes the schedule. Who would have thunk? One of the most alpha, pro alpha football coaches that are out there, where he's just kind of a bring it on kind of mentality, and he's like, you know what, that's cool. Let's go ahead and get this going against the AFC North 3 out of 4 weeks in a row. So um, not not completely shocked by that. I also just kind of think too, like I think he did need to recharge his batteries a little bit. What is his vacation spot? Hopefully, he spent a number of days there and was able to pull back a couple of Coors Lights or whatever his beverage of drink is. That isn't a Starbucks drink, and kind of refresh a little bit because um, I think it's very easy to see a guy like him and when he's football all the time and it's go 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 go, but like I'm sure he's elated to have guys back in the building. and going for OTAs. But like, if you're him, this is like boring stuff. It's like, what, there's really not much to talk about. He can talk about Hutch being there again, and things like that. But hey man, he moved around really good, going at 50% speed, like it is challenging. And I even think back to my time, covering um the some of the NFL teams in the past when I was in media, and there wasn't really much to go on for OTAs. Unless you had a high profile rookie or something like that was kind of out there. And I think Tyleek Williams, I think we're expecting a lot out of him, but I wouldn't put him in the category of a Travis Hunter, or one of these guys that they're gonna build billboards around and marketing material and stuff like that. So a little bit of a different story in Jacksonville than in here.
Yeah, for sure. So hearing you talk about Campbell kind of made me think of something that happened last week that I forgot to mention on our episode a week ago. The NFL revisited some of those rule changes that we had talked about a couple of months back when they had those big offseason league meetings in March. And they had made the call on a few of those to table a few of those discussions until May. So they finally had those conversations just before the Memorial Day holiday. And oddly enough, Phil, the Lions were one of not very many teams, I think like 11 teams total, that agreed to keep the tush push in place. And I am almost certain it's got to be a 75% quorum, if you will. So 75% of the teams have to agree on something before it gets changed. And the Lions decided to keep the tush push in place. They weren't necessarily the deciding vote or the swing vote, but there weren't too many other teams that needed to go in the other direction for the tush push to get banished. Are you surprised that the Lions agreed to keep that thing in place?
We have the NFL's most dangerous weapon in Penei Sewell, and he has not been unwrapped in enough offensive packages yet. I could totally see a scenario in a world where Dan Campbell's like, hey, you know what? We can go line skipper up on the outside in Penei Sewell's spot, and then all of a sudden Penei Sewell's your quarterback in that kind of formation. And good luck.
I mean, at this point, it's the law of the land. So, of course, I mean, why can't we open it up a little bit and start to utilize, hey, let's try to exploit some of these rules? I don't know, could happen, right? Yes. The off-season daydream, because we don't have any football to look forward to, so we're just making crap up on the fly. You gotta love it.
If I still played Madden, this is something that I would totally try to do. Like, go import the Eagles tush push play, go put Penei Sewell at quarterback, and just see if it works.
And skipper, just use him as a blocking slot. I don't care what else you do, just don't stop moving those feet.
Come on, Skip. Let's go.
All right, we are out of time here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We appreciate you trudging through this offseason alongside Phil and I. We don't take any weeks off during the NFL offseason, so Phil and I will be back for more next week on Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.